One of the strangest things about growing older is that your body knows your age, but your mind often does not. Think about it. When you were 25, did you wake up every morning thinking, I am 25 years old? Probably not. You simply felt like yourself. At 45, you still felt like yourself. And at 70, something surprising happens, you may still feel like that same person. The person looking out through your eyes has not suddenly become old. But the body has been keeping a very careful record. The knees remember every staircase. The back remembers every heavy object lifted. The heart has been beating, without a holiday, for billions of beats. Recovery takes longer. Energy becomes more precious. A task that once required no thought may now require planning. And this creates one of the hardest conflicts of life. Your mind says, I can do that. Your body says, not so fast. Imagine a man who has spent his whole life fixing things around the house. One day at 70, he climbs a ladder exactly as he has done hundreds of times before. In his mind, nothing has changed. But his balance is slightly different. His reaction time is slightly slower. The ladder has not become more dangerous. He has become more vulnerable to the same danger. That is difficult to accept because physical ability is connected to identity. If you have always been the strong one, what happens when you need help carrying something? If you have always been independent, what happens when driving at night becomes difficult? If you have always cared for everyone else, what happens when someone must begin caring for you? These are not merely physical changes. They are questions about who you believe you are. And perhaps that is what no one tells you about the years between 65 and 75. The challenge is not simply that the body changes. The challenge is that the mind must learn to update its picture of itself. But updating that picture does not mean surrender. A slower body is not an empty life. Needing help does not erase everything you have learned. Losing one ability does not mean losing all ability. The real task is adaptation. You stop asking, why can't I be exactly who I was at 40? And you begin asking a better question, with the body, time, and energy I have now, what can I still do? And what can I do differently? That question changes everything. Because aging is not simply a story of losing strength. It is a lesson in discovering that strength itself can change its form. For most of adult life, the alarm clock tells you what to do. You wake up because you have somewhere to be. There are people waiting for you. Problems need solving. Someone needs your experience, your hands, your judgment, or simply your presence. Then one day, retirement arrives, and suddenly the alarm clock becomes silent. At first, this sounds wonderful. No deadlines, no difficult boss, no traffic, no rushing in the morning. You can finally rest. But after a few weeks or months, a strange question may appear. What am I supposed to do today? This is where retirement becomes more complicated than people expect. A job is never just a job. It gives shape to time. Monday feels different from Sunday. Morning has a purpose. Evening feels like the end of something accomplished. Even complaining about work gives you a story to tell. Then retirement removes that structure. Imagine a man who has been a teacher for 40 years. Every morning, people called him Sir. Students asked him questions. Colleagues wanted his opinion. He walked into a room and had a clear role. Then he retires. The next morning, he wakes up in the same house, with the same knowledge and the same memories. But nobody is waiting for him. So what exactly has he lost? A salary, yes, but perhaps also a title, a routine, a community, a sense of usefulness, a reason to put on his shoes and leave the house. This is why retirement can sometimes feel confusing even when money is not the problem. Human beings need more than comfort. Suppose you give a person a comfortable chair, enough food, and nothing meaningful to do. Is that a good life? For a short vacation, perhaps. For 10 or 20 years. That is a different question. The difficult truth is that many people spend 40 years preparing financially for retirement, but almost no time preparing psychologically for it. They calculate their savings, pensions, and expenses, but forget to ask, who will I be when my job no longer answers that question for me? And this question matters deeply between 60, 5, and 75. Because if your entire identity was built around what you did, then stopping work can feel as if a part of you has disappeared. But retirement does not have to mean becoming unnecessary. The mistake is thinking that purpose must come with a salary. It does not. Purpose can come from teaching a grandchild something you spent 50 years learning. It can come from helping a neighbor, mentoring someone younger, growing a garden, learning a new skill, volunteering, creating something, or simply becoming the person others can depend on. The important thing is to replace the structure that disappeared. If work once gave you a reason to wake up, you must build a new reason. Because retirement is not only the end of a career. It is the beginning of a difficult experiment. Can you separate your value from your job title? And perhaps the people who handle retirement best are not those who have nothing left to do. They are the ones who discover that being finished with a job does not mean being finished with life. One of the most difficult changes between 65 and 75 does not happen in the body. It happens in the address book. When you are young, people seem to appear everywhere. School gives you classmates. Work gives you colleagues. Children connect you with other parents. Neighborhoods are busy. Weddings fill the calendar. The world seems crowded with people. But later in life, something changes. The world does not suddenly become empty. It becomes empty one person at a time. A friend moves away. A colleague retires somewhere else. A neighbor becomes ill. A brother or sister can no longer travel. Someone you have known for 40 years dies, and each loss may look small from the outside. But think about what is actually disappearing. When an old friend dies, you do not lose only one person, you lose a witness to your life. That person remembered you before your hair turned gray. They knew the stories you no longer needed to explain. They remembered the old neighborhood, the foolish mistakes, the people who are already gone. With an old friend, you could say 2 words, and they understood 20 years of history. That kind of relationship cannot be replaced quickly. This is why loneliness in later life is not simply the absence of people. You can be surrounded by people and still feel alone. The real question is, how many people truly know me? A crowded room is not the same thing as connection. And there is another problem. When people become lonely, they often become less active. When they become less active, they meet fewer people. When they meet fewer people, they become even more lonely. It is a loop, and loops are powerful because they feed themselves. Suppose you stop calling people because you think, I don't want to bother them. Then they hear from you less often. Perhaps they assume you want privacy, so they call less often too. Nobody made a decision to end the friendship. The friendship simply became quiet. This is one of the things no one tells you about aging. Relationships require maintenance. When you are young, life often creates friendships for you. When you are older, you may have to create the opportunities yourself. You may have to make the call. You may have to accept the invitation even when staying home feels easier. You may have to meet new people, even though new friendships feel different from old ones. And perhaps most importantly, you may have to say something many people find difficult. I would like some company. There is no weakness in that sentence. It is simply an accurate description of a human need. We are social creatures. We need conversation. We need laughter. We need someone to notice when we are absent. So between 65 and 75, protecting your social life becomes almost like protecting a garden. If you stop watering it, it may not die immediately. That is what makes the danger easy to miss. The leaves disappear slowly. The branches become quiet. And one day, you look around and wonder where everyone went. So call the friend. Visit the relative. Join the group. Speak to the neighbor. Make room for new people without forgetting the old ones. Because as life becomes smaller in some ways, human connection becomes larger in importance. And perhaps one of the greatest mistakes we can make in later life is waiting for the world to come knocking at our door. Sometimes, we must be the ones who knock first. When you are young, time feels almost infinite. At 20, 5 years sounds like a very long time. You can say, I'll do it someday. And somehow, someday, feels like a real place on the calendar. You will travel someday. You will call that old friend someday. You will repair that relationship someday. You will finally do the thing you have always wanted to do someday. But between 65 and 75, time begins to feel different. Not because the clock moves faster. A minute is still 60 seconds. An hour is still 60 minutes. But your understanding of time changes. Imagine you are reading a 500-page book. On page 50, you may read slowly. You may put the book down for weeks. There are hundreds of pages left. But when you reach the final 100 pages, something changes. The pages themselves are not shorter. You simply become more aware that there are fewer of them ahead. Life can feel like that. At 70, you may look backward and see 60 or 70 years of memories. Childhood, school, work, marriage, children, successes, mistakes, funerals, birthdays. Then you look forward. And for the first time, the past may appear much larger than the future. That realization can be frightening, but it can also produce something extremely valuable: clarity. When time feels unlimited, we waste it easily. We argue about things that do not matter. We postpone important conversations. We stay angry for years. We worry about what strangers think of us. We save our best clothes for a special occasion, as if we have signed a contract guaranteeing that the special occasion will arrive. But when time becomes visibly limited, a simple question appears: is this worth one of my remaining days? That is a powerful question. Is this argument worth a day? Is this resentment worth another year? Is this fear worth missing someone I still have the strength to enjoy? You begin to understand that time is not like money. If you lose money, you may earn it again. If you lose a possession, you may replace it. But an afternoon spent is gone forever. No refund, no return, no second copy. And this creates one of the great paradoxes of aging. You may have less time ahead, but you may finally understand the value of time more clearly. A young person may have 10,000 future mornings and barely notice one of them. An older person may sit with a cup of tea, watch sunlight enter the room, and understand that an ordinary morning is not ordinary at all. The difficulty is that awareness of time can move in two directions. It can create fear, or it can create attention. If you spend every day worrying about how many days remain, you lose the day that is actually here. It is like going to a beautiful concert and spending the entire performance worrying about when the music will end. Of course, the music will end. That is precisely why you should listen. So perhaps the lesson between 65 and 75 is not to pretend that time is unlimited. It is to stop demanding that it be unlimited. You do not need forever to have a meaningful day. You need today. You need enough courage to make the phone call you have delayed. Enough humility to apologize. Enough curiosity to learn something new. Enough wisdom to stop giving precious hours to people and problems that do not deserve them. At this stage of life, the question changes. When you are young, you ask, how much time do I have? Later, a better question may be, what will I do with the time I have? Because the tragedy is not simply that life is short. The greater tragedy is reaching the end of a day, a year, or a lifetime and realizing that you were always waiting for life to begin. The clock has always been moving. The difference is that now you can hear it, and perhaps that is not a curse. Perhaps it is a reminder to finally pay attention. For most of our lives, we are taught a very simple definition of strength. Strength means doing things yourself. You carry your own bags. You solve your own problems. You earn your own money. You take care of other people. You do not ask for help unless you absolutely must. And for many years, this definition works. But between 65 and 75, life begins to ask a difficult question. What happens when strength itself must change? Suppose a man has spent his entire life being the person everyone depends on. He fixes the broken door. He drives the family everywhere. He handles every problem. Then one day, he needs help. Perhaps he cannot lift what he once lifted. Perhaps he should no longer drive at night. Perhaps a simple task takes twice as long. Someone says, "Let me help you." And he says, "No, I can do it myself." Why? Sometimes it is not really about the task, it is about identity. Accepting help can feel like admitting defeat. If independence has always meant strength, then dependence, even a little of it, can feel like weakness. But consider this carefully. If a person refuses a walking stick, falls, and loses even more independence, was that strength? If someone hides a problem because they are too proud to ask for help, is that courage? Perhaps strength is not always the ability to do everything alone. Perhaps strength is the ability to see reality clearly and adapt to it. A tree gives us a simple example. In a strong wind, the rigid branch may break. The branch that bends may survive. We often admire rigidity because it looks strong. But nature teaches something different. Sometimes survival depends on flexibility, and human beings are not so different. At 70, strength may mean changing the way you do something instead of giving it up completely. It may mean walking more slowly, but continuing to walk. It may mean asking someone to drive, but still going out. It may mean accepting help with one task so that you can preserve your energy for 10 other things that matter more. This is not surrender. It is intelligent adaptation. And there is another kind of strength that becomes more important with age, the strength to release things. To release an old argument. To release the need to impress people. To release the idea that your value depends on how productive you are. For decades, the world may have asked, "What can you do?" Later in life, a deeper question appears, "Who are you when you no longer have to prove what you can do?" That can be frightening. But it can also be freeing. You may discover that your greatest contribution is no longer physical. Perhaps it is your judgment, your patience, your stories, your ability to recognize a mistake because you made the same one 40 years ago. A younger person may have more energy, but you may see consequences they cannot yet see. That is a different kind of strength. And perhaps this is the great lesson of the years between 65 and 75. You do not win by trying to remain 30 forever. You win by becoming good at being the age you actually are. That means adapting without disappearing. Accepting help without giving up responsibility. Letting go of what no longer matters while holding tightly to what does. The body may become less powerful. The schedule may become less crowded. The world may stop asking you to run as fast as you once did. But strength was never only about speed. Sometimes strength is knowing when to continue. Sometimes it is knowing when to change. Sometimes it is allowing another person to take your hand. And sometimes the strongest sentence a human being can say is not, "I can do everything myself." It is, "I know what I can do. I know what I cannot. And I still have something valuable to give." Perhaps that is the new definition of strength. Not refusing to change, but learning how to change without losing yourself.